This is Access LaPorte County, Channel 97. Coming up next is the August 1st meeting of the Long Beach Advisory Plan Commission. You can find more information for this meeting at www.accesslaportecounty.org.
Okay, I've got 5 o'clock. So welcome to the APC meeting of August the 1st. Order. Mary Lou McFadden. Here. Robert Mann here. Mike Johnstone. Here. Doug Beeler. Here. On Zoom. Anita Ramses. Yes. And Seth is not. Okay. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of 6/20/22.
Anita Ramses, motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Oh, right, you can't do that. Has to be a roll call. Sorry about that. Mary Lou?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Mike Johnson?
Aye.
Doug Beeler?
Aye.
Anita Ramses?
Yes.
Okay, so approved. Old business, we have none. New business, one agenda, I want to mention one new agenda item too, is the APC, Mike Gorman resigned from the BZA and APC. He was the member of the BZA and APC. By statute, one member has to belong to the BZA also. The APC appoints that member. And so that's on the agenda for tonight too. Under new business was whether we need to change the stairs ordinance. That's the stairs off the seawall ordinance. I'm talking to this thing. The ordinance now states that if you want to put stairs from your seawall on the public trust property, you have to stay 42 inches like we decided. But one of the other requirements was that you get permission from the DNR or the Army Corps. The DNR and Army Corps have just been incredibly unresponsive to everybody who tries to get that. So my thought is we should probably try to redo that ordinance, taking away that requirement, because it's just, nobody can get it. So if everybody agrees that that's a thing to do, maybe Chris, we could have you delete that section. I think it's just one section of that shoreline protection ordinance, particularly the one that deals with stairs, and we just take that requirement out.
Have they ever?
No.
Have they ever responded to anybody?
No, I don't believe they have.
Okay.
Their general counsel responded to me that they would get back to me and wanted to have a conversation about it. And because this came up at the building commission level, I reached out to the attorney that I've been dealing with on past matters, and she suggested that she and other counsel for the DNR would be interested in having a discussion, because what I conveyed is the town would just like to be on the same page and everybody have united front so that we know they're no longer going to consider or formally issue anything. That's good information for the town to know, so you're not holding people to some standard or level that's never going to come, right? And then there's frustration because they're not getting it permitted at this level. I have not heard back, and I will circle back, but I would imagine by next month's meeting, if you're inclined to move forward with that, I'll have an answer, or at least try to renew that conversation.
So what do you say if you haven't heard from them by next month's meeting, you come to the next meeting with that section just deleted? Yeah, I think that's reasonable. Then we're at least moving along.
And then I have a question about the other half of the ordinance. The 42 inches for the stairs. I know that there are a number of stairs that are not in code. So if we're holding people to a standard, or the town is holding them to a standard, and the discussion came out of APC that we recommended no stairs, and then there were town council members who voted for the 42 inches, a 3-to-2 vote. And I mean, just last week, someone was building more stairs at stop 23. So at what point do we say, why does this go to building commission and the building inspector and then a town attorney to continue to get people to hold to the standard that the council and a 3-2 vote asked for? So I don't see the point of 42 inches when I believe how many stairs are there out of code? I think you were going to go with the building inspector a few weeks ago.
Yeah, that process is now taking place. In fact, this morning, our building inspector and I walked the length of Lakeshore Drive. We listed all the stairs that are out of code. That list will go to the building commission at our next meeting. I'm hoping the building commission is going to instruct our attorney to send all those people letters, giving them 10 days to rectify the situation. And according to the policy of the building commission, after 10 days, if they haven't rectified the situation, daily fines commence. So the enforcement of that stair ordinance is beginning. We have been rather lax about doing it. And you know, what I'm struck by is that if you don't enforce the ordinances, people get angry at you. If you do, in fact, enforce the ordinances, people get mad at you. So my feeling is, let's do the right thing, enforce the ordinances. And I got to tell you, I already had one person who saw what we were doing down there and was mad at us. But that's the way it goes. That's how it's going to work.
So in terms of a clarification on that, are these stairs that were outside of our 42-inch requirement constructed since that ordinance was approved?
Yeah, every wooden stairs was destroyed during the storms after we did our ordinance. So yeah, those stairs were all constructed after.
So I'm assuming they did not go to the building commission for approval.
I don't believe any of them. In fact, I know none of them have gotten permits. So that's a question I want to raise at the building commission meeting. Right off the bat, there probably ought to be a citation for building stairs without a permit. And then, in addition to that, the letter about daily fines. But again, I'm going to address that with the building commission because that's not my decision.
Yeah, because my assumption was that prior, post-approval of that ordinance with the 42 inches, that anybody who had built their stairs prior to, and they were in good condition, would be grandfathered until such time as they would have to replace their stairs. And they would have to comply with the regulation or the ordinance.
Yeah, all the wooden stairs were destroyed, by the way.
Okay.
So I
There were a
go,
couple that were grandfathered and there was through some discussion, yes, those were steel, but that will also be what my recommendation to the building commission will be, that we go through and identify and make sure there aren't any that are grandfathered, and because of that issue for a couple of properties continued to rear its head, we gave them a formal letter that could be recorded so that it would follow their property, so that it wouldn't come up in the future too. So make sure that we do due diligence on all of those, just to make sure there's nothing there or that was previously approved that was just rebuilt or repaired. Making, a distinction with what might be in compliance with the code. Understood.
And actually the tour that Lou and I did of the beach was kind of pushed by a homeowner who actually had stairs, had illegal stairs. We told him to take them down. He did. And then he noticed that nobody else was taking theirs down and said, hey, what gives? So he's actually re-put in his stairs. But, it's just obvious that we need to enforce the ordinance.
all right, so we'll remain where we are until it continues to, again, be out of hand. So if you give people an inch, then they take more than the 42 inches. So I just wanted to bring it up again, that the sense of saying, okay, you can have stairs, but here's the ordinance, and then they're putting their stairs the way they wanted to anyhow. So I'd like to just keep it in front of APC in case we need to rethink it.
Yeah, daily fines will be commencing. I'm confident that that'll happen. I think that'll be the building commission's decision, but they'll have that meeting. They'll make a decision.
Okay.
So that's the
Can
deal.
I make one more suggestion for the APC's consideration? And again, we've had this discussion before, because it's such a process to change the zoning code, public hearings, notices, process with the town council, that you consider having me review with another member or present with you an alternative or amendment to the subdivision code. We've had this discussion before, mostly Dr. LeMay and I. I'll try to keep it brief so this meeting doesn't go forever. But currently, if anybody wants to split off, shore up a lot, wants to give a neighbor a parcel, turn lots into, 3 lots into 2 buildable lots, technically under the town's code, you have to go through the subdivision process. And it's more process that's needed, in my opinion. The current status of your code is a CAN provision that is probably, when we're a bigger community that's still building big subdivisions and doing those types of things and dividing up property. And the state statute allows an administrative process, an administrative subdivision that could be approved. And again, it'll make more sense if you go down that direction, think about it, but you don't have to have that process. If Anita wanted to give Mike Johnstone 5 feet between their property because it shores it up, it allows a fence, it does that, or splitting or turning, Megan Applegate, public record, she had to go through this process and she did it the right way. It was interesting to me at that time because talking to attorney colleagues who do similar work, nobody could remember a time that anybody had gone through the formal process of doing that. They used to go to the county and record the deeds in the county recorder. Now, when someone takes a deed and tries to split it off, the county is kicking it back and saying, we have an agreement with the town, because everybody, then we know what the lay of the land is. But I also think most of those subdivisions should be made easier and not harder on residents, because a lot of times, again, it's a common owner, they're taking 3 lots, making 2 buildable lots, rather than causing cost, expense, time, and all this process. There is a statutorily scheme that you can make it easier in the building commission or somebody that you would appoint to allow that to happen, as long as it's more of a check the box type requirement, that if you've done these things properly, if you have a survey and legal description, I'm giving you a brief description. So it's one of those things, as we've gone through this laundry list of things that you guys are doing to update the code or make some things easier, to get rid of some of the process. That is one that I would recommend that you keep in mind.
Given the fact that we have really a small audience, I see we have somebody on Zoom who wants to make a comment. Mr. Lusuzo, do you have a comment you want to make?
Yeah, yes, I do. There was a comment made earlier that all of the wooden stairs were taken out by the storm. I factually know that is incorrect. My stairs actually survived the storm, and I have a picture from August 4th of 2020 showing hanging over all the other stuff. So I just want to make sure that that is not a blanket statement that is accepted as truth. And also that during 2020, there was an amendment to shoreline protection ordinance that allowed us to refurbish. It basically took out any mention of stairs. And at that point, I put in a few new planks to replace the ones that were buried under the sand that were, unearthed by nature. So I just want to make that clear. My stairs are extremely sturdy. They have survived that storm. I replaced a few planks due to being buried under the sand for probably at least 10 years from the last raise of the lake. And I just don't want to be caught up in this. So thank you.
Yeah, you probably want to make that point to the building commission at that next meeting, okay? Those are the folks you really probably ought to be talking to.
Well, no, why would I be brought to the building commission if my stairs are completely fine and I never did anything against the law?
So those are the folks you probably just want to make sure they understand that's because they're the folks who are going to probably be voting to send folks letters who have illegal stairs.
So can I ask you this question? Are my stairs cited in your walkabout that building is?
My guess, I don't have the list of addresses, but my guess is if you have wooden stairs that are going down onto the public trust property, yeah, you probably are.
They're not in the public trust property. They're well below the high water mark, so they're within your just.
And yeah, if your stairs are above the natural ordinary watermark, then you're okay.
They are well above the natural high water mark, delineated by vegetation that is further out.
Yep, then you should be fine.
Okay.
And the storm was October, late October, October 31st, actually, of 2019. You mentioned a photo in August of 2020, so.
Well, again, if they're above the natural ordinary watermark, you can do anything on your own property. Well,
So the storm revealed the sand and revealed my stairs, and there were a few boards that I replaced. Just refurbishing the stairs that were buried underneath the sand. So my only question is, if you are referring me to the building commission, I'm curious why, and if so, can I be notified of that before the building commission meeting? Because sometimes there's a little bit of an issue with sending information and getting that information disseminated. So I just appreciate to be notified.
If you want to know that, probably the best thing is if you give Lou Mellon a call, he's got the list of addresses that we got today.
And he can talk to Lou. He said that my stairs were completely fine. So I'm going to take that as fine.
Sorry, he said they were fine?
Yes. In fact, I saw Lou on my property probably 3 months ago, and I unnoticed, he did not knock on my door. So I went down there and I said, "What's going on?" And he said, "Hey, I'm looking at your stairs." And I said, "Anything wrong?" He said, "No, I don't see any problems." Okay. So I basically went under the assumption there's no problems. And I know you're aware of my stairs. I mean, there was a citation done in September of 2020 that actually was an illegal citation. I did pay the $100 fine, but I just want to know where we are today. So any information that would be helpful to me would be great, just so that I know that everything is okay, because the stairs seem to be good. They're not getting in anyone's way. And we had a great volleyball game there this weekend with my neighbors.
What's your address? I can check with it.
2024.
Okay.
Can I be information that someone will respond to me prior to the end of this?
Yeah, I will check with Lou and see if you're on the list, okay?
That would be great. Thank you.
This is a good example of the ones that we find, if you do find that they are in compliance, to make official determination that their grandfather, they're good as a certain date, and then we can supply the owners with something to record with their property. So if it's sold, if it's transferred, if it comes up with future regimes, that everybody is on the same page of the determination is made.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, in fact, we had one that we looked at today where I was parked out on Lakeshore Drive. Lou was down on the beach, and a lady came out and said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Well, I'm here with the building commission." She said, "Yeah, there's this guy down there taking pictures of my property." "Yeah, that's the building inspector." And so Lou had given me her address as one that was illegal. So she came out and said, "Well, mine aren't illegal." So I said, "You know what? Let's go down. Can we go down there right now?" She actually let us go down there. And we're fine. So, yeah, this is the way we want to resolve it if we can.
I do strongly recommend though that we do a master inventory and that way.
Yeah.
You have to repeat this in the future.
Yeah.
This from the start.
I got to admit, walking from one end to the other end of the beach, Lou and I, we did it in 3 different, he did one, then I did one, then he did one. I was wore out. So, yeah, would be good if we could do it easy. Okay, next thing under new business is the appointment of a member of this committee to serve on the ECA. However, we only have 6 of us, right? 5 of us. And that's 5 out of 7. And so we would need 4 votes. I guess I'm wondering if we should maybe wait to do this till next month, so that we have well, we might have a new member from the town council at that point. And hopefully we'll at least have one, or at least have everybody here, because we gotta get the 4 votes. Does that sound reasonable to everybody? Yes. Okay. All right, next is public hearing. So, you open the public hearing.
So
Yeah.
just,
What about stop 18 path repairs? I don't know.
Stop 18 what?
It says stop 18 path repairs?
No, that's.
Oh, never mind. I will pick that up.
Next meeting.
Sorry.
Okay, so next, actually, I see Larry Wells here, so let's use his expertise. So let's open the public hearing for the steep slope / topography ordinance, okay? Because we want to use his expertise.
So we're gonna use B first, correct?
I'm gonna do B first, just so we aren't keeping Larry any longer than we have. Well, that's so.
By way of a little background, so you should have, I think that will be helpful for those that are participating to give a little bit of background. So the main change to the topography ordinance is changing the decision with regard to, the steep slope, is changing the decision from just the building commissioner to the building commission, and then some discussion as to what the slope should be, and I will defer to those who have more knowledge on that. And then the topography ordinance, what do we have there?
Basically I think we just incorporated the topography, resolution into the ordinance.
No, that is for the steep slope. And so for the public, there is such a thing called the steep slope resolution that has existed for decades. And but for those in the know or that happen to come across that, it is something that is used, that is enforced, and for the protection of the town, it's interpreted, but it isn't part of the code. So the discussion and what's up for consideration is to codify that resolution. And I know Dr. LeMay asked Larry Wall, so it's a little bit out, we'll still have the public hearing and have comments for and against, but because Mr. Wall, as the building commissioner, is here, he has a little context to give to the discussion of the steep slope ordinance, because they're, I think, quite honestly, to lay people, to me, it's not necessarily as clear as it might otherwise be.
Thanks. And so basically, what we've done as far as changes to it is we've actually made it easier for people to build properties on steep slopes. At least that's the proposal right now. The steep slope resolution was much more restrictive. We've changed that now. The recommendation is, actually, I think this needs to be changed. It says 1 foot vertical rise to 2 foot horizontal. And that actually is very, well, no, that's actually, I think, too lenient. But what we want to go to is 34 degrees, which is natural sand. Larry, do you want to comment on that? You must be muted.
Thanks, Bob. Yeah, it's and I think somebody had on the commission had sent a note when this originally came up about the state of Michigan uses 1-3, 3-1. You know, you can look at it either a lot of different ways, but what it comes down to is what is the natural repose of sand in its natural state. And the state of Michigan and some of these other municipalities use a 1 and 3. So that means that it's a steeper slope than a 1 and 2. So you're coming back 1, you're going up 2. If you come back 1 and go up 3, you're steeper. So it's in the building business, everybody kind of understands that when you talk about slope or degrees. And every soil has a different natural repose. Dry sand has 1, which you mentioned. Wet sand has another, which is steeper. And then sand with actually water in it is you know, is much, you can't really even put a natural repose to it. And I use the analogy of if you go down to the beach and you dig a 12-inch diameter hole pardon me, a hole 12 inches deep, the top of that hole has to be 2 to 3 feet wide in order to maintain the slope of the sand. If you go down towards the water where the sand is hard packed and you dig down 1 foot, the top of that hole is going to be 18 to 20 inches deep. But if you go pretty close to the water where there's actually water or you hit the water table, then you're never going to be able to dig a 1 foot hole without some type of retention. So as you mentioned, the previous ordinance, I think was, or Chris, resolution was 1 to 3, 3 to 1, whichever way you want to call it. What you guys are talking about is a 1 to 2. So that slope is less than a 1 to 3. So in every 1 foot, 12 inches of run, you're going to allow a 2 foot rise before you require retention and an engineering company to come in. And whether you call it a 3 to 1 or a 1 to 3 or a 2 to 1 or a 1 to 2, it doesn't really, you just have to make sure you understand what that horizontal and vertical rise and run are. As we talked, or somebody mentioned at one point in time about the state of Michigan. At one time, the state of Michigan wouldn't let you build on a dune damn near anything. But now they're into the 1 to 3. And what they do is they actually send somebody out to your site and they look at it and they make the determination on that individual site to say, okay, this is X, the slope is X, or the degree of the slope is X, and we are going to require you to do sheeting, some type of retention. And on a typical steep lot in this area, it's the hillside of Lakeshore Drive, around stop from 21 to 22. There are some steep areas, and then 16, 17, all those areas are steep. And every stop actually has some, except for around 24. You're pretty flat from 24 up to 25. And so what that says is, or the reason for it is, if there's a vacant lot and there's houses on either side of it and somebody wants to come in and that slope happens to be over what you guys decide, what you're going to require is you're going to require them to speak to an engineer and have an engineer come out and look at the lot and say, okay, here's what you need to do to protect your, not only your neighbors, but the landscape or slope, which we have an ordinance that you cannot just do away with the dune. I think that's called the topographic ordinance. So what you're doing is you're protecting the neighbors, because you're going to want to build out, let's pick a Lakeshore Drive site on a 40-foot lot. You can put a 28-foot wide home up and with the 6-foot setbacks. So if you want to put a full basement in, that's normally 8 feet. Let's say you're only going to go 6 feet down because you're going to have it stick out of the ground a little bit. That means that you're going to be at the lot line, or pardon me, over the lot line when you dig. You're going to be on your neighbor's property to make sure that that doesn't cave in. So what you're proposing is you come in and you're going to have to do some type of retention before you even start, so that your neighbor's house is protected. He's protected against a cave-in. You're obviously, then you have an area that you can dig and put your foundation and footings in. You have the option of, when you're done with that, let's say you use steel sheet piling for the retention, you have the option of pulling that steel sheet piling. What you do is basically rent it rather than leaving it installed. I don't know if that answers the reason why you were thinking you wanted me to say something, but if anybody has any questions, it's a very simple process, or a very simple thought process. I think it's a little difficult to understand if you haven't been in this business, but the beach thing pretty much says it all, and that's exactly what happens on a site.
And this is Chris. I just want to clarify. So you're saying that it should read that a lot with a lot that has a slope steeper than a 2-foot vertical rise and a 1-foot horizontal plane. Is that correct?
I believe that's what you guys proposed. And
I think
that
plane
is
is just backwards. I'm just trying to make sure. And then
okay.
that is more lenient than what is currently under the resolution, but sufficient from what you were saying in general terms to allow the average project to move forward, but still gives the ability for those necessary to require engineering, et cetera, determined necessary.
Yes, I mean, the 1 and 3 obviously is a steeper slope, and you're allowing that to less of a slope to go. And somebody brought up I don't know if that answers your question, Chris, but I think we're talking about the same thing.
I think we are. I'm just trying to make sure, one, that the ordering of the numbers makes sense, and then 2, it is less restrictive, but it still provides sufficient safeguards in your opinion and experience.
Yes. And there was a question brought up about decks and walkways, stairs, and things of that nature. Those are typically built on a slope, not into a slope. So most of the time, if somebody's got a steep lot and they're not going to build a home, they want to put an accessory structure or a deck on it, they're not going to cut into the hill. They're going to build that deck on top of it and have it out over the slope. And the stairs would not be cut in. Those stairs would go over the slope. So it's the ordinance, at least my understanding is what you guys want to do is make it so that if somebody's going to dig into that slope, you want to make sure that they're not only are they protected against some workers getting injured or whatever, but the neighbors are protected against erosion and cave-ins.
And Chris, you're saying that we currently have that backwards in the definition of B.
Yes, we just want to make sure that's clarified so that whatever the decision is here, that can be corrected. So that's the whole point of this public hearing, and having Larry here to kind of explain it and clarify that point.
So Larry, given that you say that the natural repose of dry sand is 34 degrees, would be wise to just say 34 degrees is the limit?
You could do that. That's I can bring that up, that chart I sent to you if you'd like. I could put it on the screen, or I don't know if one of you guys has it. Do you want me to pull it up?
Well, I can just, on your chart, you state that the natural repose of dry sand is 34 degrees.
Yes.
I guess my thought is that might be simpler than this confusing 1 foot vertical, 3 foot horizontal.
Right.
Because I don't know about everybody else, but it confuses me.
Well, it'd be better to include that chart as an exhibit and a reference point, and should you point out the different types of sand that you've discussed today, so that that make it clear. And I'm asking from your perspective, you're going to be the one interpreting it, for instance. Should that chart be part of it, and what is the source of that? And then should this be amended to discuss, again, as you said, wet sand, dry sand, all of those, or is that not necessary?
Well, I think it's fine. If you incorporate the chart into it, those are accepted principles. I can't remember where I pulled the chart from, probably an AIA site or an engineering site. And then I also sent you guys a chart of, in the construction industry, what does degrees to slope to percentages mean? And that chart went from 0 all the way to 90, which was 0, 0. And it's, I guess, Chris, in every profession, there are things that are just kind of inherent in understanding. And in our profession, that's a very easily understandable concept. But in the other professions, it's not. When somebody says to me, 3-to-1 slope, I know what they're saying, even if they've said something backwards. if they put the 1 to 3 or 3 to 1, I understand what they mean. But if you're going to codify something, it needs to be pretty distinct. And the degree is certainly going to give you a guarantee that you're not going to go over what dry sand is or wet sand. And most of what we build on out here is dry sand.
Well, and then my recommendation too is trying to make this user friendly to the extent possible, because as you said, it makes sense to you, but it might not make sense to an adjoining neighbor who doesn't want a project or is curious, wants to make sure that their property is protected, so that if that information, and we can pull a valid source that puts those in for reference purposes, I think that probably helps everybody. And then they know.
Absolutely.
And they have a basis of what those determinations need to be.
Right, and there's two reasons for the ordinance. Number one is, let's say there's a eight lots. Somebody buys 8 lots. You don't want them to. The town doesn't want them to come in and just plow those dunes down. That's part of the topography in the ordinance that you're talking about. The other thing is just that, which there are no 8 lot parcels on Lakeshore Drive right now. But the singular lot, if you live next door to somebody and your house was built years ago, nobody probably worried about it. But now, as land becomes more scarce, if I live in a house and I'm on a slope that's greater than the 34 degrees, I want to make sure that that individual that's building is going to protect me. To stop the liabilities and the problems that would happen, as everybody well knows, if there was a cave-in and some type of damage to a neighboring home. And I also want to be sure, I use steel sheet piling as an example, but that's not the only thing you can do.
And then, so before we open the public hearing, Chris had shared the public hearing, right?
You have a public hearing, yeah.
Right, but before we ask him about comments, Chris had some questions that people would ask. Who does this apply to? Anybody who wants to build on a steep lot, particularly build a structure other than a deck or stairs, because this wouldn't apply to decks or stairs. This commission realized this angle is only 26.5 degrees. Yeah, that's why we changed it to 34 degrees, or hopefully we'll change it to 34 degrees. Has the town notified any property owner that their property may be subject to this ordinance if passed? No, we haven't. Will the town abide by this ordinance when performing any work on public right-of-way, town-owned properties, and at what expense to taxpayers? I think the town has to follow their own ordinances. I don't know. I have to. How many examples of slides, erosion, unsafe structure, damaged property are there? I know there's one property now on the north side of Lakeshore Drive that's got a fence around it. If you look around that fence, you see what it can do. It's pretty sad, and it can affect the neighbors. That's a concern. Does this ordinance impose reasonable conditions? I'm not sure what that means. Who has determined this ordinance is reasonable? Our building commissioner have. And is required to protect owners, residents in the town in the improvement of contour and steep lots. So I guess our building commissioner. Our earth changes, alteration of topography and modification defined. Well, I guess those definitions should be pretty obvious. Is this based on dollar amount of the project? No. Based on a depth factor? No. Based on a percentage of the lot volume modified? No. When does the steep slope apply? Only in the area of changes. Yeah, that would be the answer.
Just as a clarification for you, Larry, this resolution has been around, and then there was a different version, so it's been around for decades.
Yeah.
If it did exist, what would be the ability, let's say this wasn't codified, and my recommendation is if you're going to have something that you're using in your floors, it should be codified versus just a resolution for. The issue is, do you need it or not? So where in the code would you address scenarios with this where steep slope and concern with regard to that on projects, where would you otherwise enforce it? Is there anything
Right now, it's the resolution. And I think the resolution, I don't know the date on the resolution, but I know it's been several years, might even be decades, I don't know. But most people, it probably, when the resolution was done, probably was not brought to a public hearing like this. I don't know the legalities of that. But that the requirement to retain, get an engineer and whatever has been on the town's books in some form before this. And I agree with you. Now, I think it gives it a little more teeth, and it's not, how do you say this? Prior to people that own steep lots, what you don't know, you don't know. They probably never went to the thing and said, hey, I own a steep lot. I wonder what the conditions are for me to do anything on this lot, even though it was there. And I think that's where you're headed. And it's obviously much easier to enforce the ordinance, I think, from a non-compliance. If somebody's going to comply, that's easy. But on a non-compliant situation, I would look to you to say, is it easier? I would think it would be easier to enforce something that was code rather than just a resolution.
Yeah, and I'm asking if there's anywhere else other than the resolution. That seems to be the only source of it. And
yes,
from my perspective, I wasn't aware of it. I wouldn't have any reason to be aware of it if I looked at the code until it was brought to my attention. In terms of enforcement requirements to comply with it, and again, future projects professionals that come in that are hired by residents, those who want to do due diligence, it's difficult. You wouldn't find that resolution in here. So if the ABC is inclined and or the town council to address it, my recommendation is that you should codify something with regard to that. What that final product looks like is up to you.
And that resolution, which is in fact more restrictive than what's being proposed today, was passed January 13th, 2003.
That's the second version. There was a prior version also, so it's been around a long time.
This is the one that we're doing away with. And again, it's more restrictive than what we're talking about. 5 points, the building commission will consider seeking to make the building commission all powerful based on very subjective criteria. Building commission is not all powerful. Any decision they make can be appealed to the Board of Zoning Appeals. Is there any house with an outdoor stairway would be non-conforming? No, we decided this does not apply to stairways. That probably does need to be stated in there somewhere, though, that decks and stairs that have footings as opposed to a structure that has a wall.
Sure, and I think a lot of those concerns will also be addressed by including, first off, you put the percentage in versus the slope. If you put in the references to Larry had from International Building Code or whatever those sources are in those charts, that will also help people understand what is or isn't depending on. So, but those are certainly significant changes to the draft.
Okay, so I think we're done with discussion. I guess now we'll open up public comment, right? So first off, want to ask the people who want to speak against this ordinance?
I just want to speak in general, yeah.
2961 Lakeshore Drive. Not sure the format of this, whether I'm having interaction or not, but first of all, I'll answer the question we had 2 weeks ago when this meeting was canceled, and that is, does having your email as part of the alerts function on the town website automatically get you agendas and meeting notices? The answer would be no. So thank you for the invite. The alerting function to allow citizens to passively receive information is not really functioning as far as I can tell. So that may be an indication why we have nobody here. So I would just posit that there is a communication problem in our town as far as citizenry involvement and the requirement to poll the website constantly for information. It would be much more helpful to receive it for interested parties.
I'm sorry, I did not see you here 2 weeks ago, but there was a man here. And so he asked me if I would let him know, so I sent him an email.
Well, Chris sent me.
Okay, good, because
But I learned to poll. so I learned to poll website. I was just answering.
And before you go forward, there's a little bit of context, as we were discussing, and this isn't the answer. Mr. Anderson and I have had this discussion. The legal requirements are different than what you may or may want to provide for your citizens, residents, and property owners. So as we discussed, the town has complied and published notice, and they posted, we posted notice, it's on the website. So the whole point here is there work being done? Does the system work as it's supposed to? So that's the context of this conversation, not that I want to speak for Mr. Anderson, but we were having an exchange in terms of conversation of how do you get the word out, and if you're part-timers, but for constantly paying attention to the website, is there another way?
So I'm not here to speak against this ordinance. It's not a correct assumption. I learned of this ordinance at the previous town council meeting. And when I then read the ordinance as I downloaded it from the website, which, by the way, those links were also broken at that time, and you could not find this document easily. You had to Google, not DuckDuckGo, not use the links within the website. You literally had to Google Long Beach Steep Slope Ordinance to actually get the PDF file. Other browsers told you there was a security problem with the document. So again, website communication, a little bit of an issue. So I don't know which part of what ordinances and resolutions we're talking about here, but this is what I downloaded from the website.
I'll clarify so that if it gives you context for your comments, the topography ordinance is the top portion.
Okay.
The steep slope resolution is incorporated into the topography ordinance as proposed, and that's the significant second portion that's all in red.
So I think Dr. LeMay actually may have found my questions useful, because it sounds like we gained some clarity on some of these points. So I would say that we should know what a structure is. Mr. Wall seemed to imply you had to dig into the earth and be creating a foundation for it to be a structure. What I read here doesn't define any of that. So I find this entire document to be too vague to be useful. Therefore, then everything winds up in committee, and it's just going to lead to more problems. So I would urge, I don't know what stage of the process you're in here, whether this is ready to go to council for first reading, but this is way too vague to be useful to anyone. So I don't think you should rush to codify the resolution. You should actually make sure it does what you want it to do, and it doesn't just provide a club for the town to beat homeowners, but actually is useful to the homeowners. So I'm glad to see that some of these points made sense. Now, for those of you confused by the geometry, I could lead you through sophomore year arctangent, arcsine, arccosine mathematics. But Mr. Wall made another point with the chart that I assume you have. Degrees and grade and slope do not all mean the same thing in this world. So I would urge you to be very clear about what it is you're talking about. A run of 2 feet with a rise of 1 foot creates a 26.5 degree angle. That's your high school geometry. That's what it'll tell you. Architects and engineers talk grade and slope and other jargon. So we should be clear what we're talking about. Maybe even an example with numbers would be helpful. But I would disagree that there's no way to articulate what excavation is.
or what topographic change is. You kind of breezed over my points 5A, B, and C about how you define earth changes and alteration of topography, because that's also not defined, right? So I've been involved in commercial projects where the state of Indiana and the DNR will allow you to disturb 10% of a wetland, right? So there are ways to define change. It could be a volume of soil. It could be some other measurement relative to the area of work. On my particular lot in Block 29, which is also a steep slope, my lot has 3 distinct areas: a sharp slope up from Lakeshore Drive, a flat building pad, and a sharp slope up to a parking area with stairs embedded into the hillside. If I go to remove those stairs, is that excavation? When an excavator shows up to dig those out and recreate the forms to replace those stairs, is that excavation? And what it sounds like you're specifically calling out stairs and decks. Excluding, okay. But are there other things like that? So I would just suggest there may possibly be a way to define those terms that are relevant to both the homeowner and the town in a way we're not hiring engineers to do every little thing around this town. My home has been on that hillside since 1925, older than all of us. Mother Nature is changing the topography of that lot every year. The dune is rolling around my retaining walls that I currently have. So in order for me to play defense, I'm going to have to come to the council, because this ordinance says current topography, not a previous topography. So Mother Nature's playing offense. It's changing my topography every year. It's pushing on my stairway. It's changing the foundation. It's doing things. So you're telling me to play defense against Mother Nature, I have to come do all this stuff. So I would just, again, point out that fact, that the homeowners are not the only ones looking to change things. Mother Nature's doing it every day. And sometimes we're going to have to play defense, which means putting in a retaining wall, adding some bricks here and there. So I'm not here against this. It sounds like we're trying to do the right thing, but in doing the right thing, I would suggest we really do the right thing and make it clear, and not just a bunch of rules to hire engineers to go to a committee and fight about whether you can build something. I understand completely the empty lot issue. Yes, you start digging in sand, and you got neighbors on both sides, you probably need some sheet piling. But the ordinance doesn't say that. It doesn't define what level of construction causes this trigger to go through all these steps. So I would put yourselves in the homeowner's shoes when you're doing these things and say, does the homeowner have a reasonable chance of understanding how to proceed with their project? That's really all I got. If anybody wants to see the actual math, I've got it for you. That's from a geometric standpoint. That may not be the same terms. There is showing. Oh yeah, thank you for your time. Great. Hopefully we can make it clear.
Good. All right, anybody else want to speak against the ordinance? Anybody want to? Okay. Mr. Devine, you want to speak against the ordinance?
Yes, Dr. LeMay, thank you so much.
Go ahead.
Or you get me traveling, so I'm in my car. But I want to thank you for everyone for doing this. It really needed to be addressed. And I know you're homeowners and I'm a homeowner. So we do this, and no matter what, we're not going to be able to please everyone. So I know you guys are in the hot seat, but at least they're moving things around. That's really great. I'm not new to this community. I've been around. I know Mary Lou McFadden used to work at ITW Red Hat, and that's where I come from as well. And before the plant closed, so I spent a lot of years admiring Long Beach and 5 years ago. We were so blessed being able to look at this property that was built in 1916. So it is the oldest property in town that started everything. And I can tell you that the history in that house is tremendous. So I know you guys do this for the love of community. You know, you guys volunteer your time, and I do appreciate that. The only way we do this is by loving our communities. So, but I guess the question, and I can resound when the prior gentleman said, it is, that was my issue, that there's so many open committees. The question is, why are we rewriting the code if the code in this bill, it is not new? In essence, we are reinventing the wheel. I'm an engineer, and I spent many years writing codes, and I can tell you it's not an easy thing to rewrite the code. You require engineers and manufacturers and a whole bunch of people. And sometimes what code, it takes 6 years. Now, the codes have changed in the past 20 years. So if this process that you started was 20 years ago, it has already changed, and there's new information that is pertinent to this slope construction. Before, in order to be safe, if you have a load of 100 pounds and you only have 25 pounds, you have a safety factor of 4. And that's how most of the building codes that were addressed 20 or 30 years ago. That's no longer the case. There is a new way of doing codes that incorporate not only the dead loads, but live loads. That's what the prior gentleman is talking about. The dunes are alive. The dunes, they have some movement. And it's not different. I'm sure you like cherry pie or blueberry pie. I can tell you that in my house, we all fight not to cut the first piece. And the reason is, once we cut the first piece, you have the filling all coming inside. Well, that is what's happening to our dunes. We have to look at the whole system. You cannot just look at one lot. You need to look at the whole dune as a structure. So if you have houses that are already pre-built and you're trying to build something new, you cannot address all these topography issues only in one lot. You gotta look into this chair, in as my example, as a pie, in order to make construction safe. Now, the building code has chapter 15 in the 2018 codes, and I know that Indiana Residential Code calls for the 2020. It is already there. The steep load is at 33 to 35%, and the code has very clear examples of that. So the question is, why are we trying to change the code? Now, I'm the kind of person that I just don't raise my hand and blame people and try to do this. I have taken a look at the code on the slopes. I'll be more than happy. I already adapted to our ordinance, and then I suggest to make some of the changes according to code. We were talking about, Larry Wells was talking about water, right? We need to have some what is called hydraulic reports, because even if you have a 33% and the sand is saturated with water, it is very different construction. It's also very different construction if you build it during the winter or during rain. If it is raining when you're digging, everything changes. That's why the code specifies that any report addressing all these hydraulic issues, it has to have a 4-month window. Now, Dr. LeMay, I don't know if you want me to email it to you. I can share my screen. You know, I went through very extensive to all the definitions. What is minimum disturbance of a lot, for example? We call in the ordinance minimal disturbance. Well, what does that mean? Just to give you an example, what the code says, in a 35% lot, you cannot remove more than 25% of the vegetation. That's very clear on the code. So there's a definition. What is the minimum vegetation? The same as the slope. What does that mean? So there's all these definitions that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. So once again, I'll be more than happy to provide the code as it is. I extracted and already put in the format for the ordinance. So you guys let me know how you want this transfer. So I humbly ask the board that you, yes, put a stop to it. Let's figure out where the rest of the municipalities today are. Not 10 years ago, not 20 years ago, not what Michigan is doing or the other code experts. They are telling the municipalities how to do this. Now, I tried to address these issues before, and I think Mr. Gorman, make fun that I have worked for Las Vegas and California and all those codes. I've worked with municipalities like ourselves. So once again, take these codes, incorporate them, and liability goes down by the minute every time we adopt something that is already written rather than to rewrite the code.
If you could send me that information, I can forward it to everybody on the committee, that would be helpful, okay?
Right.
Would that be all right?
That's all
We couldn't hear you, Bob.
Mr. Devon, you could, after this meeting, send me that information and I can share it with everybody on the committee, okay?
Right. Thanks.
Well, the definitions, Bob, of what's been discussed in the last two individuals, and especially Mr. Dubon, we use the definitions in the IRC, and if the IRC, the definition of a structure in the IRC is a 3 or 4 word sentence, and we adopt the IRC through our own chapter 150 or 155. And, I totally agree with Mr. Dubon that, there's no sense in reinventing the wheel. But in some areas, the state code is not specific to certain areas or types of construction. And we, again, go by the definitions in the code. And then if there's, and as you well know, Bob, the definition of volume was a football for months or years. And, if it's not in the code, then it goes back, I think, to Merriam-Webster's dictionary. But I don't know that we're trying to be difficult or that the APC is trying to be difficult. I think we really want to be more protectionary or protect existing homeowners against undue problems with neighbors constructing. Maybe that's not the case. I have not been, and I guess I should tell everybody, I have not been involved in the process. So maybe you've already talked about all this, but it is important to note that we don't make up our own definitions. We use the definitions that are in the existing code that governs the state of Indiana.
Let me add something to that. It's already happening. I have joined via Zoom most of the building commission meetings, and as Vikram and you, Larry, as well, you're aware that there's some damages to existing homes after construction. It's already happening. So if we talk about that we're not damaging construction, that's not what the issue is. It is. Bob Wickstrom made it very clear in a BCA meeting that there were homes beyond what he expected. They were damaged. There's a home that was built, in a stop, I believe, 16 or 17. If you talk to the neighbors, that house was built, and then the house next door, they can even open the doors. So the damage is already happening. And the more we work in these dunes, the more we're going to put the burden to fix these homes to the existing owners. I mean, I understand people want to build a dream home, but also I want to protect my dream home already. So I do encourage everyone to, before we start building, before we start just putting it to the what if, don't what it is happening, we need to be protected.
Yes, thank you. And so my first comment is we cannot hear you if you're in that room. So I would request, especially for that opening where you answered a bunch of questions that were sent in, if the minutes of this meeting are detailed. And I know it's a little bit of a complaint I have in general with the minutes of meetings, because I know that the town council doesn't actually do minutes, they just do the Zoom. If you could post those online, that would be great for a lot of people, because I think one of the issues I have, and I think some of my neighbors, is flow of information. So I would like to improve that. Second thing.
The council does have minutes, and Deanna does the minutes. And they're very.
Can we get those posted online? Because on the website, it just has the Zoom recording.
Okay, I'll check that out.
That would be awesome. Thank you.
I may get an answer before tonight.
Excellent. That would be awesome. The second thing is, I think this issue tonight with the slope is very, I don't know, it echoes some of the things that I think a lot of people have had frustration with over the past couple of years, which is 6 amendments to the shoreline protection ordinance, 5 different versions of the sewer thing. Let's do our homework first and then bring it to the community. I think it will go a long way. And I'm saying that as someone who has had some problems, and I'm not blaming anyone. I'm just saying, let's do our homework first instead of going back and back and back and forth. And now, you know, with the stair thing, we got to go to the, now the DNR doesn't want to opine, so now we have to change our ordinance again. So I would appreciate very good communication with the community, as well as homework ahead of time to inform the community. Because as I read this, the only thing I understood about this was that we didn't have something. And then I looked further and I found out in 2003, there was a 1x2 slope. So then I was able to inform myself about that. I don't necessarily oppose this amendment. I just oppose the process of putting things out there without the community involvement and community understanding. And I appreciate your smile. That's really all I have to say. Thank you. And right there, we couldn't hear you, just so you know.
You can't hear me now. You're not.
No, not at all.
One of the most important things, and as you know, I have to attend meetings by Zoom, is for anybody that's at the meeting, they have to speak directly into a microphone. Except for you, Chris. We can hear you even if we're in the next door.
Anybody else with any comments?
So my suggestion would be, if your inclination is to continue and to point out the version that is in this proposed ordinance is what exists. So the whole point was to have conversation to see if the steep slope resolution, is it still valid, is it applicable? If your inclination is to continue and go back to the drawing board, take some of this information in mind and make some changes, I would suggest that you continue the public hearing so that if there is a different version or amendments, I think it would be appropriate, it's your decision, to again allow the public to make additional comments so that you would continue this public hearing, leave it open, and have the ability to still comment before you take any final action, whatever that might be.
All right. Motion to continue this public hearing on this ordinance.
Anita Remick, second.
Any discussion? What else there? Aye. I'm in favor. Aye.
Aye.
Doug?
Aye.
All right. Okay, so next,
You know what happened? Because I didn't hear that.
we're going to continue this to the next meeting.
Can you hear me? We're going to continue it to the next meeting.
Thank you.
So, can you hear me now?
It's really, Larry, you can probably echo this. You can't really hear him very well, huh?
Yeah, Tony, and as I mentioned, everybody needs to speak directly into a microphone.
Okay, so I'd like to open the public hearing on the non-conforming ordinance. Basically, this ordinance got changed, or was proposed to be changed, because a lot of people were having to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals if they wanted to make changes on their property and they own non-conforming lots. One of the big reasons why people had to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals was if they wanted to increase the volume of their property, they had to go, we couldn't allow that. In retrospect, that was a mistake. This is another example, Mr. D'Souza, of us doing something and then later discovering that it didn't work very well.
Some work always pays off.
Yep, well, that's the deal. Well, and unfortunately, experience was the homework. So the bottom line is we want to do away with that. We want to say that you can make changes to your non-conforming property as long as those changes do not interfere with any of the other, not conflict with any of our other ordinances, basically. The only exception with volume is you can't increase the volume if you're trying to increase the volume in a side setback or back setback or front setback. So the idea is to hopefully allow homeowners to do more things to their property, require less need for them to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals. Chris, is there any other big changes on that?
No, but I want to give a little more context. In general, non-conformances are not favored under the law, and under state code, town code, which mirrors the state code, the goal is to eventually have non-conformances take care of themselves. However, this community is a great example where previous versions of the code might be canned versions and there's nothing wrong with that. Those are decisions. I'm not here to armchair quarterback, but sometimes companies that rewrite codes, they're canned, they're general. And they may apply to Michigan City, to Long Beach, to Beverly Shores, to LaPorte County, but they don't fit what your community is. And in my time of working with the town and the amount of variances that came through to the BZA for the sheer fact that you didn't have the minimum lot size, well, this is a non-conforming community in many respects in general, except for those who accumulate lots or have larger ones, but in general, people weren't allowed without going through a process that was at a minimum 2 months and sometimes 6 months to build a shed, build a screened-in porch because of the way the code is. So it's less about a matter of homework, more about, in general, how non-conformances were handled. And after some discussion at the BZA level, at previous meetings of the Building Commission, the APC, this will certainly, in many respects, allow people to streamline what they're doing and be able to have their projects and not have to get a variance because they have a non-conforming property. So you will be able to, you still have to get variances. If this were inclined to be passed, residents, property owners would have to get variances if they go over lot coverage limits or height limits, but simply because they don't have a 12,000 square foot lot, or just because there's encroachment. You can't enlarge a non-conformance, but you can certainly improve a non-conformance, so that if you have a shed, a porch that is in a setback that already exists, but you want to rebuild it, subject to whatever permits, you don't need a variance to do that. You can't build a one-level porch that turns into a two-level porch that's in the side setback, because the thought process as written is, if you're already really close to your neighbor on the side, we don't want you to be able to look in both sets of windows, right? You're already grandfathered in the bottom ones, as an example. But otherwise, in my mind, and as I advise the APC, this greatly simplifies it, and I think makes it easier for property owners to do the things that they should normally expect to do and are often surprised when they go to the building commission level and realize they can't build a deck because their lot isn't big enough. So it addresses that. It takes out all of those issues, but the overriding goal is once a non-conformance, if you have a deck that encroaches into the side setback and you tear it out, you have a house that doesn't meet a front or side setback and you tear it down, and then you ask, that's different. You've gotten rid of the non-conformances. But as they exist, the whole point is to not limit it, hamstring what you can do on your property and add process and cost and time to your project.
Chris, I have a question for you on this. 154.128 It says if two or more vacant lots in single ownership or combined into a single tax parcel, according to the Fort County Tax Assessment purchases having continuous front zoning lot are of record at the time of the original adoption of this chapter, each of which doesn't meet the minimum requirement established for a zoning lot, the land involved shall be considered to be a single lot for the purposes of this chapter. Does that mean that the owner has to combine those lots at the surveyor's office also? Because it's talking about tax purposes at the assessor's office.
If they're combined for tax purposes, that's what.
So that is combined at the assessor's office too. Okay, just want to be clear on that. All right, anybody have any other comments up here? All right, so we'll open the public hearing. Anybody have comments in favor of this ordinance? See any? Anybody have any comments against this ordinance? I don't see any.
I just one question. I'm not against or for. I'm just curious, does this reduce the liability of the town in any way for approving structures?
No, what it does is it'll decrease the work of the town because we'll have less appeals to the Board of Zoning Appeals and make it easier for homeowners to make changes to their structures on their properties.
It doesn't take away any compliance issues with regard to the code as it is, the building codes, getting permits. What it does is allow you to build a deck or replace a deck. For instance, if it's already permitted and you're in a side setback and you want to rebuild that, you're going to be allowed to rebuild that without having to get a variance. Or if you want to build a deck and you have it the way that it has been applied in the past and your lot wasn't 12,000 square feet and the requirement was to have a buildable lot and you have 11,500 square feet, you had to go get a variance to build a deck because you weren't allowed to. It's simplifying and cutting that out because you could never be a compliant lot, right? That lot is already, unless you bought other lots. And there's other communities that try to make you demonstrate where you've tried to purchase other lots and do all those things. And again, this is an example of trying to make things easier on property owners and cut out some of the process.
Excellent. Would this have prevented any of the septic systems that fell in?
No, this is a whole different issue.
Well, I mean, okay. So it doesn't impact that at all.
Okay. Any other comments for or against? All right, I'll close the public hearing. I'll make a motion to send this to the town council with a favorable recommendation. Is there a second?
Anita, just second.
Discussion? Oh, very good.
Aye.
Done.
Aye.
I'm an aye. Anita?
Yes.
Aye.
Okay. Any public comments?
Well, I guess, so I'm just going to say, I appreciate any form of communication you can give to the community. And I am on the email list as well, and I never receive anything about meetings. So just a general comment, and I appreciate all of your work. I know everyone in government is underpaid, so thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ron. Closing matters, next meeting is on August 15th. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. I make a motion.
Anita, just second.
Do this one. Second.
Aye.
I'm an aye.
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 All right, we're adjourned.
I'll see you in 20 minutes.
So.